The distress signal arrived on a Tuesday morning, cutting through the routine chatter of Earth's deep space communication array like a knife through silence. Lieutenant Sarah Chun was halfway through her third cup of coffee when the automated systems began screaming their electronic warnings across the monitoring station. "Ma'am, we're receiving an emergency transmission," Sergeant Rodriguez called from his station, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. "Signal origin unknown. But the pattern matches standard galactic emergency protocols." Sarah set down her mug and moved to the central console. The massive screen flickered to life, displaying wavelength patterns that made her blood run cold. She had seen these emergency codes only in training simulations, never from an actual alien civilization. "Are you certain this isn't a drill?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The Deep Space Array had been operational for only 3 years since humanity's first contact with the Galactic Federation, and every signal they had received had been routine diplomatic communications or trade negotiations. "Negative, ma'am. This is broadcasting on all emergency frequencies simultaneously. High-power transmission, definitely artificial origin." Rodriguez paused, his face pale. "Ma'am, the signal strength suggests this is coming from somewhere in the Outer Rim territories. That's at least 47 light-years from here." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. For an emergency signal to reach Earth from that distance with this level of clarity and urgency, whatever was happening out there had to be catastrophic. She activated the priority channel to Earth Defense Command. "Command, this is Deep Space Monitoring Station Alpha 7. We have a code black emergency transmission from unknown origin in the Outer Rim, requesting immediate analysis and response authorization." The reply came within minutes, the voice of Admiral Marcus Webb crackling through the secure channel. "Station Alpha 7, this is Earth Defense Command. Download all signal data immediately and maintain monitoring. We're scrambling the analysis team." 3 hours later, the translation came through. Sarah stared at the decoded message displayed on her screen, reading it twice before the full horror sank in. "Urgent distress call to all civilized species. The Drakari swarm has breached our outer defenses. Colony World Kepler, 442b under total assault. Population 12 million. We cannot hold. Please, if anyone receives this message, remember US. Remember the Zalani people. Our children. God's help US. They're coming for the children." The transmission ended there, cutting to static that spoke of death and desperation across the void. Within 6 hours, every major government on Earth had been briefed. Within 12 hours, the United Earth Assembly was in emergency session. The debate raged for days, but the outcome was inevitable. Humanity had received its first test as members of the galactic community, and the response would define them for generations to come. Admiral Webb stood before the assembly, his weathered face grave. "Ladies and gentlemen, we face a choice that will echo through history. The Drakari swarm is a name that strikes fear into every spacefaring civilization in this galaxy. They are not conquerors seeking territory or resources. They are devourers consuming entire worlds and leaving nothing but barren rock in their wake." Representative Kim Nakamura from the Pacific Alliance raised her hand. "Admiral, our military capabilities are impressive for a young species, but we're talking about entities that have terrorized the galaxy for millennia. What can Earth possibly do that the advanced civilizations cannot?" Admiral Webb smiled grimly. "That, Representative Nakamura, is exactly what we intend to find out." The decision was unanimous. Earth would launch its first major military expedition beyond the solar system, not for conquest or expansion, but to answer a cry for help from beings they had never met. The preparations began immediately. Every shipyard in the Sol system worked around the clock. The pride of Earth's fleet, the massive dreadnought UES Indomitable, was selected as the flagship. Built using a combination of human engineering and adapted alien technology, it stretched 3 kilometers from bow to stern and carried enough firepower to crack a small moon. But Admiral Webb knew that one ship, no matter how powerful, would not be enough. The response fleet grew daily as more vessels were added to the Armada. Heavy cruisers like the UES Defiance and UES Relentless joined the formation. Fast attack vessels and support ships followed. By the end of the first week, Earth was assembling the largest military force in its history. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the fleet assemble through the massive viewport. Ships of every class and configuration took their positions in formation, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor plating and newly installed weapon systems. "Captain, we're receiving confirmation from all vessel commanders," reported her communications officer. "The fleet is ready for departure on your command." Elena nodded, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders. She was leading humanity's children into the unknown, possibly to their deaths, all for the sake of beings they had never seen. Yet there had been no shortage of volunteers. When the call went out for crews to man the rescue fleet, applications flooded in from across Earth and its colonies. "All ships, this is Indomitable Actual," she broadcasted across the fleet channels. "Today we depart Sol not as conquerors or explorers, but as guardians. Somewhere in the darkness, innocent beings are crying out for help. We go to answer that call, knowing that our actions today will determine whether humanity is remembered as a species that stood up to evil, or one that turned away when courage was needed most." The fleet began its journey with the activation of humanity's most advanced faster-than-light drives. The massive vessels disappeared one by one into the swirling vortexes of hyperspace, beginning a journey that would take them across 47 light-years of empty space to reach a world they had never seen. But even as the human armada raced toward the outer rim, the situation on Kepler 442b was deteriorating rapidly. The Zilani defenders had fallen back to their final strongholds, ancient cities with energy shields powered by geothermal plants deep underground. The Drakari swarm surrounded them like a living nightmare, their bioships pulsing with malevolent intelligence as they systematically destroyed everything in their path. High Commander Theladeus stood atop the tower of the last functioning defense center, watching the writhing mass of enemy vessels that filled the sky. The Drakari ships defied easy description, looking more like enormous insects than spacecraft. They moved with organic fluidity, their hulls rippling with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to mock the dying cities below. "High Commander, our shields are at 30% and falling," reported his aide, young Velteron, her blue-scaled face marked with exhaustion. "The Southern District fell 20 minutes ago. We're receiving scattered reports from civilian shelters, but most communications are down." Theladeus nodded grimly. The Zilani were known throughout the galaxy for their artistic achievements and philosophical wisdom, not for their military might. They had always relied on the protection of larger civilizations, but when the Drakari swarm had erupted from the galactic void, even their most powerful allies had been caught unprepared. "Any word from the Galactic Federation?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Negative, sir. The last transmission we received was 3 days ago, acknowledging our distress call and promising to consider intervention." Velteron's voice carried bitter irony. "Consider intervention while 12 million beings face extinction." A new alarm began wailing as another section of the city's shields flickered and failed. Through the gaps, Drakari warriors began pouring in like a living flood. These creatures were the stuff of nightmares, standing 3 meters tall on multiple chitinous legs, their razor-sharp appendages dripping with bioacid that could melt through most known materials. "Sir, we're detecting incoming hyperspace signatures," called the sensor operator from across the command center. "Multiple contacts heading directly for our position." Theladeus felt his heart sink. More Drakari reinforcements, no doubt. The swarm had already deployed thousands of bioships against his world. What was a few dozen more? Configuration analysis shows wait. The operator's voice changed, becoming confused and then excited. "Sir, these aren't Drakari vessels. The signatures are completely different. Artificial construction, metallic hulls, unknown energy signatures." Through the command center's viewing portal, new shapes began materializing in the planet's upper atmosphere. Sleek, angular vessels that gleamed with polished metal and geometric precision. They were beautiful in their symmetry, a stark contrast to the organic horror of the Drakari bioships. "Unknown fleet, This is High Commander Theladeus of the Zalani Defense Force. He broadcasted on all frequencies, hardly daring to hope. Are you responding to our distress call? The reply came in accented galactic standard, the voice carrying a strange accent none of them recognized. High Commander, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Indomitable. We received your SOS 47 days ago. Sorry we're late to the party, but we brought some friends. As if summoned by her words, more human vessels began dropping out of hyperspace around the planet. Massive dreadnoughts, sleek cruisers, and swarms of smaller attack craft took defensive positions with military precision that spoke of extensive training and discipline. Theladeus stared in amazement. He had heard rumors of the newest species to join the Galactic Federation, a young race called humans from a world they called Earth. But these beings had supposedly achieved spaceflight only recently. What were they doing here, 47 light-years from their home system, facing the most feared enemy in the galaxy? Captain Vasquez, I must warn you, he transmitted urgently. You face the Drakari swarm. They have destroyed entire star systems. Your vessels, however impressive, may not be sufficient against their biotechnology. The human captain's response was immediate, and her tone carried something Theladeus had never heard in communications with other species. It was not fear or calculation, but a cold, determined anger. High Commander, we didn't travel 47 light-years to turn around at the first sign of trouble. Earth stands with the Zalani people. All human vessels, this is Fleet Command. We are weapons-free. Engage the swarm, and show them what happens when they threaten innocent beings. The battle for Kepler 442b was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Drakari swarm reacted to the arrival of the human fleet with characteristic aggression. The bioships that had been systematically demolishing Zalani cities turned toward the newcomers, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent warning patterns. From the planet's surface, Theladeus could see the massive creatures beginning to cluster together, forming attack formations that moved with the fluid coordination of a hive mind. Human vessels, you're entering a combat zone, he warned. The Drakari bioships are equipped with acid-based weaponry that can eat through most conventional armor. Their tactics are unpredictable, and they show no mercy to fallen enemies. Captain Vasquez's response came with the sound of battle stations' alarms in the background. Understood, High Commander. We've studied the available data during our journey. Earth has a few surprises of our own. The first exchange of fire lit up the planet's atmosphere like a second sun. Drakari bioships launched streams of corrosive plasma that seemed to home in on their targets with living intelligence. The acidic projectiles moved in serpentine patterns, adjusting their course to intercept human vessels that attempted evasive maneuvers. But the humans were ready. Instead of the energy shields favored by most galactic civilizations, their ships deployed overlapping magnetic barriers that deflected the bioplasma attacks rather than absorbing them. The acid streams were redirected harmlessly into space, leaving the human vessels unscathed. Fascinating, Theladeus murmured, watching the tactical display. They're not trying to stop the attacks directly. They're using the enemy's own momentum against them. The human counterattack was equally surprising. Instead of energy weapons or particle beams, their ships launched solid projectiles at incredible velocities. The kinetic rounds struck Drakari bioships with devastating effect, punching through their organic armor and causing massive internal damage. But it was the smaller human vessels that truly caught the Zalani commander's attention. Squadrons of fighters, each no larger than a Drakari warrior, moved with precision and coordination that seemed impossible for individual pilots. They swarmed around the much larger bioships like angry insects, striking at weak points with surgical accuracy before darting away from retaliatory attacks. How are they coordinating so effectively? Velturun asked in amazement. Each fighter seems to know exactly what the others are doing. Theladeus was wondering the same thing. Most spacefaring species relied on centralized command structures for fleet coordination, but the humans seemed to operate on multiple levels simultaneously. Individual pilots made split-second decisions while maintaining perfect formation discipline with their squadrons. The battle raged for hours, and slowly the tide began to turn. The Drakari swarm, accustomed to facing enemies who relied on energy weapons and traditional shielding, found themselves struggling against human tactics that seemed to defy conventional space combat doctrine. Their bio ships, powerful as they were, had evolved to counter specific types of technology. The humans were using something entirely different. High Commander, the human fleet is requesting permission to land ground forces, reported the communications officer. They say they have specialized units trained for urban combat against hostile bioforms. Theladuz almost laughed despite the desperate situation. Ground forces? The Drakari warriors were 3-meter tall, killing machines with acid for blood and razor-sharp appendages that could cut through steel. What could any ground force do against such creatures? Captain Vasquez, I appreciate your offer, he transmitted, but I must warn you that Drakari warriors are extremely dangerous in close combat. They are fast, deadly, and feel no pain. Most civilized species avoid ground engagement with them entirely. The human captain's response was immediate. High Commander, with respect, most civilized species haven't met human marines before. We're deploying the 1st Expeditionary Force to assist your people. Consider it a formal introduction. What happened next would become legend among the Zilani people for generations to come. Human dropships, sleek and fast, descended through the planet's atmosphere, while fighter escorts cleared the way. The landing craft touched down in the embattled cities with precision that spoke of extensive practice, their ramps dropping to reveal something that shocked even the battle-hardened Zilani defenders. The human soldiers who emerged were not the fragile beings most species expected from a young civilization. They moved with confidence and discipline, their armor gleaming with advanced technology. But it was their demeanor that caught Theladuz's attention. Where other species might show fear or hesitation when facing the Drakari, the humans displayed a cold, professional anger that spoke of beings who had learned warfare in the harshest possible schools. The first encounter between human marines and Drakari warriors took place in the ruins of the Southern District. A squad of 12 humans, led by Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, moved through the rubble-strewn streets with weapons that seemed almost primitive compared to the energy-based arms of most galactic civilizations. Contact Front called Corporal Jackson, his rifle already tracking movement in the shadows ahead. 3 Drakari warriors, range 50 meters, and closing. The creatures that emerged from the ruins were nightmare, fuel-given flesh, and chitin. Each stood 3 meters tall, moving on 6 articulated legs that allowed them to scuttle across any surface with spider-like agility. Their multiple arms ended in blade-like appendages that dripped with bioacid, and their compound eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence. Most sentient beings would have fled from such apparitions. The humans opened fire. The sound of human weapons was different from anything the galaxy had heard before. Not the whine of energy discharges or the hum of particle beams, but sharp cracks that echoed off the broken buildings like thunder. The projectiles they fired were simple pieces of metal, accelerated to hypersonic velocities by chemical explosions and magnetic acceleration. The lead Drakari warrior staggered as multiple rounds struck its carapace, then kept coming. Its bioarmor was designed to absorb energy attacks and deflect most known projectiles. But human ammunition was different. The rounds were designed to tumble and fragment upon impact, creating massive internal damage, even if they didn't fully penetrate. Staff Sergeant Santos smiled grimly as she watched her squad's fire discipline. These Marines had trained for months against holographic simulations of Drakari warriors, studying every piece of intelligence Earth's xenobiologists could provide. They knew exactly where to aim for maximum effect. Aim for the joint connections, she called. Disable their mobility first, then go for kill shots. The humans had learned something that more advanced civilizations had somehow missed. The Drakari warriors, for all their bioengineer perfection, still followed basic biological principles. Sever the nerve connections, destroy the joint systems, and even the most fearsome predator became helpless. The firefight lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, 3 Drakari warriors lay motionless in the street, their bioacid blood eating small craters in the pavement around them. The human Marines checked their weapons and continued their advance, already calling for extraction coordinates for trapped Zalani civilians. Word of the human ground forces' success spread rapidly through the remaining Zalani strongholds. The beings who had seemed so fragile and young were systematically dismantling Drakari positions that had resisted the planet's best defenders for days. They moved with purpose and efficiency, treating the nightmare creatures as just another tactical problem to be solved. But the humans had brought more than just superior tactics and weapons. As they advanced through the devastated cities, they began implementing something the galaxy had never seen before in the face of a Drakari invasion: organized civilian evacuation procedures. All Zalani civilians. This is Major Patricia Williams of the United Earth Marine Corps, came the transmission broadcast on all local frequencies. We are establishing safe corridors for evacuation to our hospital ships in orbit. Follow the blue marker lights to reach Marine positions. We will get you out of here. The evacuation effort was massive in scope and stunning in its execution. Human soldiers established defensive perimeters while other teams moved through collapsed buildings, using advanced sensors to locate survivors trapped in the rubble. Medical corpsmen provided emergency treatment to wounded Zalani civilians, working with field equipment that seemed impossibly advanced for such a young species. Dr. Jennifer Park, Chief Medical Officer of the hospital ship UES Mercy, found herself treating patients from an alien species she had studied only through transmitted medical data. The Zalani were reptilian humanoids with blue-scaled skin and large, expressive eyes that reminded her of dolphins. Despite the anatomical differences, their children cried in their parents' arms just like human children would. "Doctor, we have another group of casualties coming up from the surface," reported Nurse Commander Phillips. 15 adults, 8 children, all suffering from exposure to Drakari biotoxins. Dr. Park nodded, already moving toward the receiving bay. The human medical teams had worked around the clock to develop treatments for Drakari bioweapons, using samples collected during the first day of fighting. It was dangerous work, but the doctors and nurses had volunteered for the mission, knowing they might face exactly the situation. What amazed her was not just the medical challenge, but the response of her crew. These humans had traveled 47 light years to help beings they had never met, and they were treating the Zalani patients with the same care and dedication they would show to their own families. "Doctor, the young one in bed 7 is asking for her parents," Nurse Phillips reported quietly. "They were separated during the attack. We haven't been able to locate them yet." Dr. Park looked at the small Zalani child, no more than 6 years old by their species development cycle, and felt a familiar tightness in her chest that came with treating pediatric patients. The little girl's large eyes were filled with fear and confusion, looking for adults who might not be coming back. "I'll talk to her," Dr. Park said, "and get someone from the search teams on the comm. We find her family, whatever it takes." It was moments like this that defined humanity's first major intervention in galactic affairs. Not the tactical brilliance or superior technology, but the simple refusal to abandon innocent beings to suffer alone. The human crews worked with desperate intensity to save every life they could, treating each rescued Zalani civilian as if they were rescuing their own families. As the second day of fighting drew to a close, the situation on the ground had changed dramatically. Human forces had established secure zones around every major Zalani population center, while the orbital battle continued to rage above. The Drakari swarm, faced with tactics and technology they had never encountered before, began to show something unprecedented in their millions of years of galactic terror: uncertainty. Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying tactical displays that showed the current battle situation. Her fleet had taken casualties, but they had also achieved something no other civilization had managed in recorded history. They were winning a direct confrontation with the Drakari swarm. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Drakari command vessel," reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Torres. "It's different from their usual attack patterns." Captain Vasquez raised an eyebrow. The Drakari had never been known to communicate with their victims except to announce their intention to devour them completely. "Put it through." The voice that emerged from the bridge speakers was unlike anything in galactic communication records. It carried harmonics that suggested multiple beings speaking in unison, with undertones that seemed to bypass the auditory cortex and speak directly to primitive fear responses in the brain. "Humans of Earth," the voice said, each word dripping with malice and something that might have been respect. "You fight as no species has fought before. The swarm acknowledges your strength." Captain Vasquez exchanged glances with her senior officers. According to every piece of intelligence they had received, the Drakari never acknowledged anything except their own hunger and the weakness of their prey. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of a United Earth ship Indomitable," she replied formally. "Are you requesting negotiations for the withdrawal of your forces from this system?" The response came with what almost sounded like laughter, if laughter could be made from the sounds of grinding bone and screaming metal. "Negotiations? No, young species. The swarm offers you something far more valuable. Join us. Abandon these weak prey beings and add your strength to ours. Together, we will devour galaxies." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Drakari swarm, the terror of civilized space, was offering humanity partnership in their eternal campaign of consumption and destruction. It was an offer that no species in galactic history had ever received. Captain Vasquez's response was immediate and delivered in a tone that carried the full weight of her species' moral authority. "Drakari swarm, this is our answer. Earth stands with the innocent. We stand with the Zilani people, and we stand against you. Withdraw from this system immediately, or we will demonstrate exactly why humans have never been prey to anyone." The alien laughter returned, but now it carried undertones of anticipation and predatory hunger. "So be it, humans. You have chosen to stand with the weak. The swarm will remember this when we consume your worlds and add your children to our biomass." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Captain Vasquez looked around at her officers, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. They had come here to answer a cry for help, and they had succeeded beyond all expectations. But now they faced a new challenge. The Drakari swarm had marked humanity as an enemy. "All stations, this is the captain," she announced across the fleet channels. "The enemy has made their position clear. They see our compassion as weakness and our civilization as prey. It's time to show them exactly how wrong they are. All vessels, prepare for full-scale combat operations. We end this here and now." The real battle was about to begin, and the galaxy would learn what it meant when humanity decided to make a stand. The Drakari response to humanity's defiance was swift and terrible. Within hours of Captain Vasquez's rejection of their alliance offer, the swarm began deploying bioweapons that had destroyed entire star systems in the past. From the writhing mass of their largest bioships, spore clouds began spreading through Kepler 442b's atmosphere, designed to break down organic matter at the molecular level. Dr. Jennifer Park watched the atmospheric readings from the medical bay of the UES Mercy with growing alarm. "These spore concentrations will kill every living thing on the planet within 72 hours, she reported to the Fleet Command Channel. "The biodegradation process is unlike anything in our biological warfare databases." Admiral Webb's voice crackled through the communication system from Earth, where the crisis was being monitored in real time through quantum entanglement communicators. "Doctor, what are our options for protecting the civilian population?" "Sir, we need to evacuate every living being from the planet's surface immediately," Dr. Park replied. "Our hospital ships can accommodate roughly 50,000 beings in emergency conditions. The Zilani population still planetside is approaching 8 million. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Humanity's rescue fleet, impressive as it was, could not save everyone. The realization hit every human in the fleet simultaneously, creating a moment of collective determination that would echo through their species' history. Captain Vasquez made the decision that defined her career and her species' reputation. "All vessels, this is Fleet Command. Operation Guardian Angel is now in effect. We evacuate every living being from this planet whatever the cost. Requisition every cargo hold, every maintenance bay, every space that can support life. We're not leaving anyone behind. What followed was the largest emergency evacuation in galactic history, executed by a species that had been spacefaring for less than a century. Human cargo vessels designed to carry supplies transformed into refugee transports. Military ships reconfigured their interiors to accommodate alien physiology. Even fighter craft were modified to carry Zilani children in their cargo compartments. Commander Sarah Kim of the heavy transport UES Atlas found herself coordinating the evacuation of an entire Zilani city. Her ship, designed to carry military equipment, was being retrofitted in real time to support 12,000 alien civilians. "Chief, I need environmental controls recalibrated for Zilani respiratory needs," she called to her engineering section. "And get those thermal regulators online. Their body temperature runs 15 degrees higher than ours." Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez emerged from a maintenance shaft, his uniform stained with coolant fluid. "Ma'am, we can make it work, but it's going to be tight. We're talking about cramming 12,000 beings into spaces designed for cargo pallets." "Then, we make it work, Chief," Commander Kim replied firmly. "These people answered a distress call from beings they'd never met. We can damn sure figure out how to keep them alive for the journey home." The evacuation proceeded with mechanical precision that amazed the Zilani civilians. These humans moved with purpose and efficiency that spoke of extensive disaster response training, treating each evacuee with dignity and care despite the desperate circumstances. Young Velteron, the aide to High Commander Theladuz, found herself aboard the UES Defiance alongside 3,000 other Zilani civilians. She watched the human crew working around the clock to ensure their comfort and safety, and couldn't help but compare it to her people's interactions with other galactic civilizations. "Why are they doing this?" she asked Dr. Marcus Webb, the ship's physician who was treating injured evacuees. "They barely know us. Their species has been part of the Galactic Federation for only 3 years." Dr. Webb looked up from his Zilani child he was treating for biotoxin exposure, his weathered face showing the exhaustion of 36 straight hours of medical care. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "Where we come from, that's reason enough." The answer was so straightforward, so completely devoid of political calculation or strategic consideration, that Velteron found herself staring at the human doctor in amazement. In her experience with galactic politics, every action had multiple motives. Every gesture of aid came with conditions and expectations of future reciprocity. But as she watched the human medical teams working to save Zilani lives, she realized that these beings operated on principles that transcended traditional galactic diplomacy. They had traveled 47 light years and risked their lives not for territory or resources or political advantage, but simply because other beings were suffering and needed help. The evacuation continued even as the space battle intensified around the planet. Drakari bioships launched increasingly desperate attacks against the human vessels, recognizing that their prey was being systematically removed from their reach. But the humans had prepared for exactly this scenario. All escort vessels maintained defensive screen around evacuation transports, ordered Captain Vasquez from the bridge of the Indomitable. No Drakari craft gets through to the civilian ships. Whatever it takes. The fighter squadrons responding to her command were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Where most spacefaring species relied on heavily armored craft with powerful shields, human fighters were fast, agile, and flown by pilots who seemed to have no concept of impossible odds. Lieutenant Jake Phoenix Morrison led his squadron through a swarm of Drakari biofighters, his F-90 Raptor dancing through acidic plasma streams that would have melted most conventional spacecraft. The human fighters used their superior maneuverability to stay ahead of the organic weapons, striking at vulnerable points before darting away from retaliatory fire. Phoenix leader, "You have incoming biocraft on your 6, warned his wingman, Lieutenant Sarah Ghost Chun. "Copy that, Ghost. Let's show these bugs how humans dance." Morrison threw his fighter into a spiraling dive that brought him dangerously close to the planet's atmosphere, using gravity and atmospheric friction to accelerate beyond the biofighter's ability to follow. At the last possible second, he pulled out of the dive and reversed direction, coming up behind his pursuers with targeting locks already established. Fox 2! Fox 2! He called, launching kinetic kill missiles that struck the Drakari biofighters before they could react to his position change. Splash 2 bandits. Ghost, your turn to lead. The aerial ballet continued around the planet as human pilots demonstrated tactics that had been developed in the deadly skies above Earth, refined through generations of aerial combat. The Drakari biofighters, for all their organic sophistication, had never faced an enemy that treated three-dimensional combat as an art form. But even as the fighters held their defensive screen, the situation in space was becoming increasingly desperate. The Drakari swarm was deploying bioships from reserve positions throughout the system, surrounding the human fleet with overwhelming numbers. Captain, we're detecting massive Drakari reinforcements dropping out of biospace, reported the tactical officer aboard the Indomitable. At least 300 additional bioships, including what appears to be a swarm-class Devourer vessel. Captain Vasquez studied the tactical display with growing concern. A swarm-class Devourer was a bioship the size of a small moon, capable of literally consuming planets for biomass. Intelligence reports suggested they required the combined firepower of entire galactic battle fleets to destroy. Estimated time to complete evacuation, she asked. 47 hours at current pace, Captain, replied her operations officer. The cargo reconfiguration is taking longer than projected. 47 hours. The math was simple and terrifying. The human fleet could not hold against these odds for 47 hours, not without support from other galactic civilizations. And those civilizations had already made their position clear. They would consider intervention, but take no immediate action. It was Admiral Webb who provided the solution, his voice carrying across the quantum communicator from Earth with the calm authority of a man who had spent his life making impossible decisions. Captain Vasquez, this is Earth Defense Command. We're implementing Protocol 7. The Omega Fleet is departing Sol System immediately with a full warload. Hold your position and protect those civilians. Help is coming. Protocol 7. Captain Vasquez had heard of it only in the most classified briefings, Earth's ultimate contingency plan for large-scale interstellar conflict. The Omega Fleet was everything Earth could spare without leaving the home system defenseless. 50 capital ships, 200 escort vessels, and the experimental weapons that human military scientists have been developing since first contact with alien technology. But even traveling at maximum faster-than-light speed, the Omega Fleet would need 72 hours to reach Kepler 442b. The evacuation fleet needed to hold for 47 hours, but reinforcements wouldn't arrive for 72. The gap was 25 hours that could determine whether humanity's first major galactic intervention ended in heroic victory or catastrophic defeat. All vessel commanders, this is Captain Vasquez, she broadcast across the fleet channels. I'm not going to lie to you about our situation. We're outnumbered at least 20-1, facing an enemy that has destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours. But we have something they don't understand. We have people depending on us, and we have each other. Earth doesn't abandon its own, and today, the Zilani people are our own. The response from the human fleet was immediate and unanimous. Every captain, every department head, every enlisted crew member understood what was being asked of them. They needed to hold an impossible position against overwhelming odds, protecting 8 million civilians while outnumbered by an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Fleet Command, this is Commander Patricia Wells of the UES Relentless, came the reply from one of the heavy cruisers. My ship and crew are ready to hold the line. We didn't come this far to back down now. Similar confirmations poured in from every human vessel in the system. The crews that had volunteered for this mission had understood from the beginning that they might not be coming home. What they hadn't expected was that their sacrifice might be the thing that saved millions of innocent lives. The Drakari assault began 3 hours later with a coordinated attack that demonstrated the full horror of their biotechnology. Massive bioships launched living projectiles that sought out human vessels with predatory intelligence, while smaller craft deployed clouds of nanoscale organisms designed to eat through ship hulls and life support systems. But the humans were ready. Captain Rebecca Santos of the heavy cruiser UES Defiance had spent months studying Drakari tactics during the journey from Earth, developing countermeasures that turned the enemy's own bioweapons against them. All-point defense systems. Engage area denial protocol, she ordered. Let's see how their living missiles handle a few thousand tungsten ball bearings traveling at relativistic velocities. The human point defense systems opened fire in patterns that filled space around the fleet with overlapping fields of kinetic projectiles. The Drakari biomissiles, designed to home in on their targets, found themselves flying through walls of metal moving at incredible speeds. The organic projectiles, for all their sophisticated guidance systems, were still subject to basic physics. High-velocity impacts shredded them before they could reach their targets. The nanoorganism clouds presented a different challenge, but human ingenuity had prepared for this as well. Instead of trying to destroy the microscopic attackers, human vessels deployed electromagnetic pulse charges that disrupted the bioelectrical systems the organisms used for coordination and navigation. Target the Big Ugly in Grid 77, ordered Commander Martinez from the bridge of the UES Thunderbolt. All batteries, full spread. Show them what human engineering can do. The coordinated firepower of 6 human capital ships focused on a single Drakari bioship the size of a city. Kinetic projectiles, each weighing several tons and traveling at significant fractions of light speed, struck the organic vessel with devastating effect. The bioship's living armor, evolved to deflect energy weapons, proved inadequate against the simple physics of mass and velocity. But for every Drakari bioship the humans destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The swarm's numbers appeared endless, and their tactics became increasingly desperate as they realized their prey was escaping. Captain, the evacuation transports are reporting harassment by Drakari infiltrator organisms, reported the communications officer aboard the Indomitable. Small bioforms are attempting to breach hull integrity on the civilian ships. This was exactly what Captain Vasquez had feared. The Drakari were no longer simply trying to destroy the human fleet. They were attempting to contaminate the evacuation vessels, turning the rescued civilians into weapons against their rescuers. Deploy Marine boarding teams to all evacuation vessels immediately, she ordered. Full biocontainment protocols. We do not let a single Drakari organism reach those civilians. What followed was combat unlike anything in galactic history. Human Marines, trained for ship-to-ship boarding actions, found themselves hunting alien organisms through the corridors and cargo holds of their own vessels. The Drakari infiltrators were smaller than their warrior caste, but no less dangerous, moving through ventilation systems and maintenance conduits with predatory efficiency. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos led her squad through the cramped corridors of the transport UES Liberty, following scanner readings that indicated Drakari bioforms had infiltrated the ship's lower decks, where Zalani civilians were sheltering. Movement ahead, whispered Corporal Jackson, his weapon trained on the junction ahead. Signature suggests 3, maybe 4 of the infiltrator variants. The creatures that emerged from the shadows were nightmarish even by Drakari standards. No larger than Earth house cats, they moved with liquid grace on multiple limbs that ended in razor-sharp claws. Their bodies pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed designed to hypnotize their prey, and their mouths revealed rows of needle-sharp teeth that dripped with paralytic venom. Contact, Santos called quietly, not wanting to panic the civilian refugees nearby. Engaging hostile bioforms. The firefight was brief, but intense. Human weapons, designed for larger targets, had been modified with special ammunition for exactly this situation. Fragmenting rounds that exploded into clouds of metal shards proved devastatingly effective against the small, fast-moving infiltrators. But it was the aftermath that truly demonstrated human character. As Santos and her squad secured the area, they found a group of Zalani children who had been separated from their parents during the boarding action. The youngsters were terrified, huddled together in a storage compartment, their large eyes filled with fear. "Hey there, little ones," Santos said softly, removing her helmet to show her face. "Ay Maya. We're here to keep you safe." She didn't speak their language, and they didn't speak hers, but kindness translated across any species barrier. The Marine sergeant, trained for the most violent forms of combat, gently coaxed the frightened children from their hiding place and personally escorted them back to the civilian areas where Zilani adult refugees could care for them. It was moments like this that defined humanity's intervention at Kepler 442b. Not just the tactical brilliance or superior technology, but the simple recognition that every life had value, that every being deserved protection from those who would harm them. The evacuation continued through the night as human vessels worked around the clock to remove every living being from the planet's surface. Medical teams treated injured civilians. Engineering crews reconfigured cargo spaces for alien physiology, and combat personnel held defensive positions against increasingly desperate Drakari attacks. Dr. Jennifer Park had been working for 36 straight hours when she received the call that would haunt her for the rest of her career. "Doctor, we have a Zilani family unit requesting permission to remain planetside," reported her communications officer. "I'm sorry, what?" Dr. Park asked, certain she had misheard. A Zilani family, approximately 15 individuals including children, are refusing evacuation. They're requesting to remain in the primary cultural center on the southern continent. Dr. Park felt her blood run cold. The cultural center housed the greatest artistic and philosophical works of Zilani civilization, accumulated over thousands of years of cultural development. The family was staying behind to guard their people's heritage, knowing it meant certain death when the biospores completed their work. "Give me a direct channel to their position," she demanded. The face that appeared on her screen was that of an elderly Zilani male, his blue scales marked with the intricate patterns that indicated high academic achievement among his people. Behind him, Dr. Park could see younger adults and children, all wearing the formal robes of cultural preservation specialists. "I am Elder Kethmoral," he said in careful galactic standard. "We are honored by humanity's sacrifice for our people, but we cannot abandon our sacred charge. These works represent 10 millennia of Zilani thought and artistic achievement. If they are lost, our culture dies even if our people survive." Dr. Park understood immediately. She had seen the same dedication among human artists and scholars who viewed themselves as guardians of their species' cultural heritage. But understanding didn't make the decision any easier. "Elder Kethmoral, we can evacuate cultural artifacts along with your people," she offered. "Our cargo vessels have room for artwork and data storage systems." The elder's expression was gentle but firm. "Doctor, there are 10 million individual pieces in this facility alone. Your vessels could not carry even a fraction of them. We have made our choice. We ask only that humanity remember the Zilani people not just as refugees you saved, but as beings with a culture worth preserving." The transmission ended, leaving Dr. Park staring at a blank screen. Around her, the medical bay continued its work of treating injured evacuees, but she felt the weight of what she had just witnessed. These beings were choosing death over cultural extinction, trusting humanity to carry their people's memory into the future. It was Captain Vasquez who provided the solution, her voice carrying across the fleet channels with an authority that brooked no argument. "All vessels, this is Fleet Command. Operation Archive is now in effect. We're going back for their cultural heritage. No civilization dies on our watch." The plan was audacious even by human standards. While the majority of the fleet continued evacuation operations, specialized teams would return to the planet's surface to document and preserve as much of Zilani culture as possible. They would use portable scanning equipment to create digital archives of artwork, literature, and scientific works, preserving them in quantum storage systems for future generations. Commander Sarah Kim volunteered to lead the cultural preservation mission, taking a team of human scholars and data specialists back to the planet's surface. They had less than 18 hours before the biospores reached lethal concentrations. "Elder Kethmoral," she transmitted as her shuttle approached the cultural center. "This is Commander Kim of the United Earth Fleet. We're here to help preserve your people's heritage. Every piece of art, every written work, every musical composition. We're going to save it all." What followed was a race against time that would become legendary in both human and Zilani history. Human technological specialists worked alongside Zilani cultural experts, using advanced scanning equipment to create perfect digital copies of artistic works that had taken centuries to complete. The quantum storage systems could preserve not just visual images, but tactile properties, chemical compositions, and even the emotional resonances that Zalani artists embedded in their works through bioneural interface techniques. Young Velteron, monitoring the operation from orbit, watched in amazement as the humans worked with desperate efficiency. They treated each Zalani artwork with the same reverence they might show to their own species' greatest cultural achievements, understanding instinctively that they were preserving not just objects, but the soul of an entire civilization. "Why are they doing this?" she asked Dr. Webb, who was coordinating medical support for the cultural preservation teams. "They could use those ships and personnel for more evacuations." Dr. Webb looked at the tactical display showing the ongoing operation, where human teams were risking their lives to scan ancient Zalani poetry and preserve musical compositions that predated human civilization by millennia. "Because that's what humans do," he said simply. "We don't just save lives. We save the things that make those lives worth living." The Drakari response to humanity's cultural preservation mission was swift and violent. Bioships that had been focusing on the orbital battle suddenly redirected toward the planet's surface, recognizing that their prey was not simply escaping, but preserving the very cultural identity that the swarms sought to devour. "All teams, this is Commander Kim," came the transmission from the surface. "We have incoming Drakari biocraft. Continue preservation operations. We're not leaving until every piece of Zalani heritage is secured." The battle for the cultural center became a symbol of everything humanity represented in the galaxy. Human Marines established defensive positions around teams of scholars and data specialists who continued their work even as Drakari warriors closed in around them. Fighter squadrons dove through the planet's atmosphere to provide close air support, their pilots pushing their aircraft to the limits of performance to protect the preservation mission. Elder Keth Morrill and his family worked alongside the humans, their knowledge of the cultural center's layout proving invaluable as the teams raced to catalog and preserve thousands of years of artistic achievement. The elderly Zalani scholar found himself working beside young human graduate students who treated his people's philosophical works with the same respect they would show to their own species' greatest thinkers. "Commander, we have Drakari bioforms breaching the outer perimeter," reported Staff Sergeant Santos from her defensive position. "Estimated 47 hostiles, multiple warrior variants." "Copy that, Sergeant," Commander Kim replied, her hands still flying across the scanning interface as she preserved a collection of Zalani musical compositions. "Hold them as long as possible. We need another 6 hours to complete the archive." 6 hours. Against 47 Drakari warriors with unlimited reinforcements available. The mathematics were impossible, but human Marines had never been known to abandon a mission simply because the odds were unfavorable. The defense of the Cultural Center would become one of the most studied battles in human military history, not for its tactical innovation, but for its demonstration of what humans would sacrifice to protect the heritage of another species. Marines who had never heard of Zalani civilization 2 months earlier fought with desperate courage to preserve poetry and artwork that they couldn't even read. As the final hours of the preservation mission counted down, every being in the system understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Humanity had traveled across the galaxy not for conquest or profit, but to answer a cry for help from strangers. And now they were risking everything not just to save lives, but to ensure that an entire culture would survive, even if its homeworld did not. The evacuation fleet held their positions around the planet as the Drakari swarmed through everything they had against the human defenses. Ships burned in space, Marines fell defending alien artwork, and pilots pushed their fighters beyond safe operational limits to buy precious minutes for the cultural preservation teams. But they held. Against impossible odds, outnumbered and outgunned, humanity's first great galactic intervention succeeded not through superior technology or overwhelming firepower, but through simple, stubborn refusal to abandon those who needed their help. The galaxy was about to learn what it truly meant when humans decided to make a stand. The arrival of the Omega fleet changed everything about the battle for Kepler 442b. The massive human armada dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their appearance so sudden and overwhelming that even the Drakari swarm paused its assault for a moment of what could only be described as shock. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the UES Sovereign, the massive dreadnought that served as flagship for Earth's most powerful military formation. At 5 kilometers in length and bristling with experimental weapons, the Sovereign represented the pinnacle of human military engineering, designed specifically for large-scale interstellar warfare. Admiral, Fleet Status Report, called as Operations Officer, Commander Lisa Park. All vessels have successfully transitioned from hyperspace. No mechanical casualties during the jump sequence. Admiral Webb nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the current battle situation. The original rescue fleet was still holding defensive positions around the planet, but their formations showed the strain of nearly 60 hours of continuous combat. Dozens of human vessels showed battle damage, and the Drakari swarm had grown to overwhelming proportions during the time it had taken the Omega fleet to arrive. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Captain Vasquez aboard the Indomitable, reported the communications officer. She's requesting immediate tactical coordination for ongoing evacuation operations. Put her through, Admiral Webb ordered. Captain Vasquez's image appeared on the main screen, her uniform stained with smoke and her face showing the exhaustion of 3 days of desperate fighting. Behind her, the bridge of the Indomitable showed clear signs of battle damage, with repair crews visible working on damaged console systems. Admiral, situation report. She began without preamble. We've successfully evacuated 7.4 million Zilani civilians to our transport vessels. Cultural preservation operations are 93% complete. But we're running out of time. The biospore concentration will reach lethal levels planet-wide in 14 hours. Admiral Webb felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. 14 hours to complete the largest evacuation in galactic history while fighting off an enemy force that outnumbered them more than 30 to 1. Even with the Omega fleet's arrival, the odds were still heavily against them. Captain, what's the status of the remaining civilian population? He asked. 600,000 beings still planet-side, mostly in remote settlements that we haven't been able to reach. They're spread across 3 continents, and each location is heavily defended by Drakari ground forces. Vasquez paused, her expression grim. Sir, we need to make a choice. We can evacuate the cultural preservation teams and the civilians already in our transport network, or we can go after the remaining 600,000. We don't have the resources to do both. It was the kind of impossible decision that defined military leadership, but Admiral Webb had not traveled 47 light years to abandon anyone. Captain, we do both. The Omega fleet is here to ensure that no being on this planet dies alone. The plan that emerged from the tactical conference between the 2 fleet commanders was audacious even by human standards. The Omega fleet would establish total space superiority around the planet, eliminating every Drakari bioship in the system and providing cover for massive ground operations to reach the remaining civilian populations. But first, they had to deal with the Swarm-class Devourer that had been moving steadily toward the planet since the battle began. The massive bioship, easily the size of Earth's moon, represented a threat that no single vessel could handle. It would require the combined firepower of the entire Omega fleet to destroy. All vessels, this is Admiral Webb, he broadcast across both fleet channels. Target designation Alpha Prime, the Swarm-class Devourer. All capital ships will engage simultaneously on my command. This creature has destroyed entire star systems. Today, it learns what happens when it threatens beings under human protection. The coordinated attack by 50 human capital ships was a sight that would be remembered for millennia across the galaxy. The massive vessels, each bristling with experimental weapons that had been developed specifically for this class of threat, opened fire simultaneously. Kinetic projectiles the size of city buildings, antimatter warheads, and experimental plasma cannons all focused their energy on a single target. The Swarm-class Devourer had evolved over millions of years to resist the weapons of galactic civilizations. Its bioarmor could absorb energy attacks that would crack planets, and its regenerative capabilities allowed it to recover from damage that would destroy conventional spacecraft. But it had never faced the concentrated firepower of a species that had learned warfare in the most violent possible schools. Commander Sarah Kim, now aboard the heavy cruiser UES Retribution, watched the massive bioship through her vessel's viewports as human weapons struck its hull. "Tactical, what's our damage assessment?" she asked. "Ma'am, initial strikes have penetrated the creature's outer bioarmor," reported her tactical officer. "But it's already beginning regenerative processes. Estimate full recovery in approximately 47 minutes." 47 minutes. The Swarm-class Devourer could heal from damage that would destroy a fleet of conventional warships in less than an hour. It was a reminder of why these creatures had terrorized the galaxy for so long, and why most civilizations simply fled rather than fight them. But Admiral Webb had anticipated this challenge. "All vessels, implement Protocol Omega-7. Sustained bombardment pattern, rotating firing sequences. We don't give it time to heal." What followed was a demonstration of human tactical doctrine that amazed even veteran military observers across the galaxy. Instead of delivering massive strikes and then waiting to assess damage, the human fleet maintained continuous fire on the Swarm-class Devourer. As soon as one group of ships expended their ammunition, another group took over, ensuring that the creature never had a moment's respite from incoming fire. The bioship's regenerative capabilities, evolved to handle periodic attacks, could not cope with sustained bombardment that never ceased. Massive wounds opened in its organic hull faster than they could heal, and critical biosystems began failing under the constant stress of repair processes. "Admiral, we're detecting massive bioelectrical failures throughout the target," reported the sensor operator aboard the Sovereign. "The creature appears to be entering some kind of biological shock state." For the first time in recorded galactic history, a Swarm-class Devourer was dying. The massive bioship, which had consumed entire worlds and devoured civilizations, was being systematically destroyed by a species that had achieved spaceflight less than a century earlier. The creature's death was unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed. Instead of exploding like a conventional spacecraft, the Swarm-class Devourer simply stopped. Its bioluminescent patterns faded to darkness. Its organic hull lost structural integrity, and it began breaking apart under its own massive gravity. Within hours, the terror weapon that had taken millennia to evolve was nothing but debris drifting through space. But the humans had no time to celebrate their victory. The remaining Drakari bioships, witnessing the death of their most powerful weapon, entered a feeding frenzy that spoke of desperate rage. They threw themselves against the human fleet with suicidal abandon, recognizing that their eternal campaign of consumption had met an enemy that could not be intimidated or devoured. Captain Rebecca Santos of the UES Defiance found herself in the thick of the desperate battle as dozens of Drakari bioships converged on her vessel. "All hands, prepare for ramming attack," she ordered as her tactical display showed enemy vessels abandoning range combat in favor of direct assault. The Drakari bioships moved with organic grace, their living hulls rippling as they accelerated toward human vessels. But Captain Santos had trained for exactly this scenario, and her crew responded with precision that spoke of extensive preparation. "Emergency turn, port 90 degrees. All engines, flank speed. Show them how humans dance." The Defiance pivoted on its axis with mechanical precision, bringing its main battery to bear on the approaching bioships while simultaneously accelerating away from their intended ramming path. The human vessel's weapons fired at point-blank range, kinetic projectiles punching through organic armor that had been weakened by previous bombardments. But it was the Defiance's maneuver that truly demonstrated human tactical superiority. Instead of trying to outrun the bioships, Captain Santos used their own momentum against them, allowing them to overshoot her position before reversing direction to attack them from behind. "Target their propulsion systems," she ordered. "These creatures move by biological processes. Disrupt the bioelectrical pathways, and they become sitting ducks." It was a tactic that exemplified humanity's approach to the Drakari threat. Where other species saw incomprehensible alien monsters, humans saw biological systems that followed scientific principles. Disrupt the right nerve clusters, damage the correct organ systems, and even the most fearsome predator became helpless. The space battle raged for 12 hours as the combined human fleet systematically destroyed every Drakari bioship in the system. But even as they achieved space superiority, the race against time continued planetside. The biospore concentration was approaching lethal levels, and 600,000 Zilani civilians were still scattered across remote settlements. Major Patricia Williams of the 1st Expeditionary Force coordinated the largest ground operation in human military history from her command post aboard the UES Thunderbolt. All Marine units, we have 14 separate civilian populations to extract in the next 8 hours, she briefed her battalion commanders. Each location is defended by significant Drakari ground forces. We go in fast, we go in hard, and we bring everyone home. The Marine assault was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Human dropships descended through the planet's atmosphere in perfect formation, their fighter escorts clearing the way with precision strikes against Drakari defensive positions. But it was the ground combat that truly amazed alien observers. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos led her squad through the ruins of a Zilani farming community where 300 civilians were trapped in underground shelters. The Drakari warriors defending the position had turned the settlement into a fortress of organic architecture, their bioconstructs pulsing with defensive systems that could detect approaching enemies at considerable distances. Thermal imaging shows 47 Drakari warriors in defensive positions, reported Corporal Jackson from his overwatch position. They've got the civilian shelters completely surrounded. Most military forces would have called for heavy bombardment to clear the defensive positions, but such tactics would endanger the civilians they were trying to rescue. Santos made the decision that defined human ground operations throughout the campaign. We go in close, she announced to her squad. Building to building, room by room, if necessary. Those people are counting on us, and we don't let civilians get hurt by our own fire. What followed was urban combat that showcased everything human military forces had learned from generations of conflict on their homeworld. The Marines moved with tactical precision through the destroyed settlement, using advanced sensors and communication systems to coordinate their advance while minimizing collateral damage. The Drakari warriors, accustomed to facing enemies who relied on overwhelming firepower, found themselves struggling against an enemy that treated close-quarters combat as an art form. Human weapons were designed for accuracy rather than raw destructive power, allowing Marines to neutralize threats without endangering nearby civilians. Contact front, single Drakari warrior, range 20 meters, called Private Rodriguez as his squad advanced through what had once been the settlement's marketplace. The creature that emerged from the rubble was a nightmare of bioengineered perfection, standing 3 meters tall and armed with blade appendages that dripped corrosive acid. Its compound eyes tracked the human Marines with predatory intelligence, and its chitinous armor gleamed with bioluminescent threat patterns. But Private Rodriguez had trained against holographic simulations of exactly this enemy. His first shot disabled the creature's primary locomotive system. His second disrupted its bioelectrical nervous pathways, and his third punched through its skull case to destroy the neural cluster that controlled its higher functions. The entire engagement lasted less than 15 seconds. The Drakari warrior, for all its bioengineered advantages, had never faced an enemy that understood its biological weaknesses so completely. The pattern repeated across the planet as human Marine units systematically cleared Drakari positions and rescued trapped civilians. Each engagement demonstrated the same combination of tactical precision and biological understanding that allowed relatively small human forces to defeat enemies that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. But it was the human interaction with rescued civilians that truly defined the operation. Dr. Marcus Webb, working with field medical teams across 3 continents, found himself treating Zilani families who had been trapped underground for days without food or clean water. "Doctor, we have a family unit in critical condition," reported Nurse Commander Phillips from a civilian shelter they had just cleared. multiple cases of biotoxin exposure, severe dehydration, and what appears to be psychological trauma from extended Drakkari contact. Dr. Webb entered the underground shelter to find 12 Zilani civilians, including several children, huddled together in conditions that spoke of desperate survival. The adults showed clear signs of biotoxin poisoning from exposure to Drakkari waste products, while the children displayed the wide-eyed fear that came from days of listening to the sounds of alien predators hunting above their heads. "Hello," he said softly in Galactic Standard, removing his helmet to show his face. "I'm Dr. Webb. We're here to take you somewhere safe." The response from the civilian families was immediate and overwhelming. Despite their exhaustion and fear, despite coming from a completely different species, they recognized something in the human medical teams that transcended biological differences. These beings had risked their lives to reach them, and they were treating each rescued civilian with the same care they would show to their own families. Young Velteron, monitoring the rescue operations from orbit, watched the field reports with growing amazement. Human forces were not simply extracting civilians and departing. They were providing medical care, emergency supplies, and even psychological support to beings who had endured days of terror. "Dr. Webb, why are your people doing this?" she asked during one of the medical coordination calls. "You could evacuate the civilians quickly and minimize your exposure to Drakkari counterattacks. Instead, your teams are spending precious time treating injuries and providing comfort." Dr. Webb looked up from a Zilani child he was treating for severe dehydration, his weathered face showing the exhaustion of 5 days of continuous medical operations. "Because that's what we do," he said simply. "When someone is hurt, you help them. When someone is afraid, you comfort them. That's not negotiable, regardless of what species you're dealing with." The simplicity of his answer was shocking in its implications. These humans operated on moral principles that seemed to transcend traditional calculations of risk, benefit, or species loyalty. They helped others because it was the right thing to do, regardless of the personal cost or strategic complications. The evacuation continued through the day as Marine units cleared settlement after settlement, each rescue operation demonstrating the same combination of tactical excellence and moral courage that had characterized humanity's entire intervention at Kepler 442b. By the time the biospore concentration reached critical levels, every living being on the planet had been evacuated to human vessels. Elder Keth Morrill stood in the observation deck of the UES Liberty, watching his homeworld through the massive viewport as the final evacuation transports cleared the planet's atmosphere. Around him, thousands of Zilani refugees filled every available space on the human vessel, their belongings limited to whatever they had been able to carry during the emergency evacuation. "Commander Kim," he said to the human officer coordinating refugee services, "my people owe humanity a debt that can never be repaid. You have saved not just our lives, but our entire civilization." Commander Kim looked at the elderly Zilani scholar, seeing in his eyes the same mixture of gratitude and sorrow she had witnessed in every refugee they had rescued. These beings had lost their homeworld, but they had gained something else, the knowledge that there were beings in the galaxy who would risk everything to help strangers in need. "Elder Keth Morrill, there's no debt between friends," she replied. "And that's what we are now, friends." The cultural preservation mission was completed just hours before the planet became uninhabitable. The quantum storage systems aboard the human vessels contained perfect digital copies of every significant work of art, literature, music, and scientific achievement in Zilani history. Future generations would be able to experience their cultural heritage exactly as their ancestors had created it, preserved by beings who understood that a civilization's soul was worth saving along with its people. Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the Sovereign, watching the final transport vessels clear the planet's gravity, well as the biospores reached lethal concentration levels across the surface. Below them, Kepler 442b was dying, its once beautiful continents turning gray and lifeless as the Drakkari bioweapons completed their terrible work. "Admiral, all vessels report successful evacuation completion," reported his operations officer. "Total civilian count, 8.06 million beings, all safely aboard human vessels." 8 million beings. An entire civilization saved from extinction by a species that had been part of the galactic community for less than 3 years. Admiral Webb felt the weight of what they had accomplished, but also the knowledge that this was only the beginning. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from multiple sources," called his communications officer. "The Galactic Federation Council, the Centauri Alliance, the Vegan Trade Consortium. Everyone wants to know what happened here." Admiral Webb smiled grimly. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was not just another young species seeking membership in existing power structures. They were beings who would travel across the cosmos to answer cries for help, who would sacrifice their own safety to protect others, and who would never abandon innocent beings to suffer alone. "Send a message to all galactic civilizations," he ordered. "Inform them that the Zilani people are under human protection. Any species that offers them refuge and assistance will have Earth's eternal gratitude. Any being or organization that attempts to exploit their vulnerability will answer to the United Earth Defense Force." The rescued Zilani civilians aboard human vessels had no way of knowing that their salvation marked a turning point in galactic history. Humanity had announced its presence on the cosmic stage not through conquest or intimidation, but through compassion and courage. The galaxy would never be the same. But even as the evacuation fleet prepared for the journey home, new challenges were emerging. The Drakari swarm, denied their prey at Kepler 442b, were regrouping for a campaign of revenge against the species that had defied them. Intelligence reports suggested massive bioship formations moving toward human space, carrying weapons and organisms specifically designed to counter the tactics that had proven so effective. Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying long-range sensor data that painted a disturbing picture of the future. "Admiral, we're detecting significant Drakari movement throughout the outer rim sectors," she reported. "They appear to be adapting their biotechnology to counter our kinetic weapons and tactical doctrines." Admiral Webb nodded grimly. He had expected this development. The Drakari swarm had survived for millions of years by learning from their defeats and evolving countermeasures against any species that proved capable of resistance. Humanity had won the first battle, but the war was just beginning. "Captain, how long until we reach Sol System?" he asked. "At current speed, 72 hours, sir," Vasquez replied. "But the refugee transports are slowing our overall transit time." Admiral Webb made the decision that would define Earth's strategic position for years to come. "All vessels, maintain current formation. We escort the Zilani people to safety, whatever the cost. Earth doesn't abandon its friends, and we're not starting now." The journey home would be anything but peaceful. Long-range scouts reported Drakari hunter-killer formations moving to intercept the human fleet, while intelligence sources suggested that other hostile species were taking advantage of the chaos to launch their own predatory campaigns against vulnerable civilizations. But humanity had crossed a line from which there could be no retreat. They had seen innocent beings crying out for help across the void, and they had answered that call with everything they had. Now the galaxy knew what humans would sacrifice for others, and what they would do to protect those under their care. The real test was yet to come. Earth would soon face enemies that had learned from humanity's tactics, bioweapons specifically designed to counter human technology, and political pressure from galactic civilizations that saw the young species as dangerously disruptive to the established order. But as Admiral Webb watched the rescued Zilani civilians adapting to their temporary homes aboard human vessels, he felt no doubt about the choices they had made. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not as conquerors or supplicants, but as guardians. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with the same courage and compassion that had saved 8 million innocent lives. The galaxy was about to learn what it truly meant when humans decided to make a stand, and that lesson would echo through the cosmos for generations to come. The journey back to Sol System became a running battle that tested every aspect of human military doctrine and moral commitment. The Drakari swarm, humiliated by their defeat at Kepler 442b, had deployed hunter-killer formations specifically designed to intercept the evacuation fleet and reclaim their lost prey. Admiral Webb stood in the command center of the U.S. Sovereign, studying tactical displays that showed an increasingly desperate situation. The human fleet, slowed by refugee transports carrying 8 million Zelani civilians, was being pursued by Drakari bioships that had adapted their tactics based on their previous encounters with human forces. Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting at least 4 separate Drakari formations converging on our position, reported Commander Lisapar from the tactical station. They appear to be using coordinated jump tactics to stay ahead of our early warning systems. The coordinated jump tactics were new development that demonstrated the swarm's terrifying ability to learn from defeat. Instead of approaching in massive formations that human sensors could detect from great distances, the bioships were making small hyperspace jumps that brought them closer to the evacuation fleet while remaining below the